In today's video, we're making a batch of cutting boards and trying out a few new designs, including one a customer just didn't make. This video was made possible by Typebond. Since this is a smaller batch, I wanted to experiment a little more instead of just making the usual designs. This time of year is generally a little slower, which gives me more room to either build some extra inventory or try out some new ideas. One of these boards actually started out as a custom request, but the customer ended up backing out before I made it. Whether it was the price, the timeline, or maybe they just didn't connect with the design. It happens. Usually when customers already have a logo or clear idea, it's pretty easy for me to throw together a mock-up so they can visualize the final board. But this one was different. I had seen Nick over at Brownwood make a few sea turtle boards, and I thought they looked awesome. So I decided to design my own vision. The problem is, it's hard to justify making a super specific board when you don't know if anyone's actually gonna buy it. But then a potential customer reached out wanting a sea turtle board, because their friend worked at some sort of sanctuary or something like that. I can't really remember. And I thought, perfect, finally an excuse to make this thing. But in the end, it just didn't work out, and honestly, that's okay. Normally, I would have shelved the file and moved on, but I liked this design way too much not to make it. So instead of letting it sit on my computer, I decided to turn it into a one-off board and see if anyone would connect with it. Now let's take a look at these designs we came up with. We struggled to decide which one to go with, but we both liked the maple one on the left best. For the walnut, it almost needed to be inverted to look more visually balanced. It's kind of the same idea with stickers or logos. A design that looks great on a light background doesn't always translate directly to a dark one. And just to give you a visual, this is what it looks like not altered with a maple inlay on a walnut board. And as you can see, it just doesn't look right. Thankfully, I've always been pretty good at graphic design. Although, we may have made a few mistakes along the way and accidentally ended up with 2 turtle boards instead of 1. So I guess the real question is, who wants a turtle board? Or 2? Before we get too far ahead of ourselves, we still have a whole batch of boards to get through. And if you were curious whether Typebond wood glue sticks to epoxy floors, the answer is yes. Yes, it does. I've used Typebond for years, and it's never really given me a reason to switch. But when it comes to my actual process, I'm constantly experimenting and trying to find better and more efficient ways to make these boards. One thing I've been experimenting with lately is running the blanks through the drum sander after they come out of the planer. The planer gets them nice and flat, but the drum sander helps clean everything up, leaving a much smoother finish before glue up. And as you can hopefully see here, there's almost like a shiny spot, which equals a low spot. It's kind of hard to see on camera, but it definitely pointed out some inconsistencies. It wasn't really something I could visibly see because the boards looked perfectly flat, but every once in a while I'd end up with weird glue joints that I wouldn't notice until much later in the process. Sometimes I'd even recut the seam and reglue the parts to essentially fix the board. The joint wasn't bad or anything, it just wasn't perfectly seamless. I couldn't completely figure out what was causing it, but my guess was there was tiny inconsistencies coming out of the planer, whether it was a little bit of snipe or the material just didn't feed through perfectly even. So I started giving the boards a couple light passes through the drum sander afterward, and honestly it seemed to solve my problem completely. It adds a few extra minutes to the process, but I'd rather spend a little more time up front than discover a bad glue joint later on. And I think that's one of the reasons I'm constantly experimenting with my process. Most of the things we change are pretty small individually, but over time those little improvements stack up into a workflow that's faster, more consistent, and just less frustrating to deal with. And later on we run into a pretty major issue that makes me rethink a whole lot of my process altogether. Which brings me to another thing I recently started experimenting with. In my last cutting board video, I tried out this new surfacing bit called the Ripper bit. It cut my surfacing time down to about half of what it used to be. At first though, I wasn't completely sold on it because it absolutely tore out the edges of the board. But then a commenter suggested doing a conventional profile pass around the outside of the board before surfacing the actual board. Which is just a fancy way of saying cut the outside pass first before you cut the inside. And that ended up working like an absolute charm and completely fixed my problem. So moral of the story, don't be afraid to try something new because odds are there's a better way to do it. And now on to making the plugs or the part that will be used as the inlay. In short, these are pretty much thin versions of the large board, as end grain boards need to have an end grain inlay or they'll just fail pretty fast. And the workhorse drum sander, or also known as Big Bertha in some groups, gets everything nice and even for me. But I'm constantly checking for flatness while working on these. Since the drum sander generates heat, you can actually warp the piece if you get too aggressive with it. I honestly check flatness non-stop throughout the entire process. Pretty much after every step, I'm ensuring that everything is flat or can return to being flat. Which is also why I love this AirWeights vacuum bed, because it holds it flat through the entire process. Versus if you're removing all this material from one side, it can actually end up warping the board, creating like a high spot in the middle, just resulting in an uneven inlay. And trying to cut and press an inlay into a warped board would kind of be like trying to glue a potato chip into a perfectly machined pocket. It might look close at first, but odds are if you have to overly force it, it's probably going to have gaps somewhere. Gaps equal failure. And that's what this board almost became, a failure. Not in terms of quality, but in terms of delivery time. When I get an order, I never really know the full story behind it. Our website pretty much has a lead time listed for cutting boards. But I don't know if somebody needs it for a wedding gift, anniversary, birthday, or something else important unless they tell me. If I know ahead of time somebody needs a board by a certain date, I can usually work around it as long as it fits within my time frame. But sometimes a customer reaches out later asking for an update and suddenly I find out they need it in like a week and a half, while I'm already pushing the tail end of my lead time. And that definitely adds a little bit of pressure. Since everything is made completely from scratch, it's not really time efficient for me to make one board at a time. Usually I'll wait until I have around 5 boards ready and then batch everything together. Which means depending on where your board falls on the schedule, you might get it 3 weeks early or possibly near the end of the lead time or a little late. So I pretty much went into oh crap mode and pushed this one right in front of the line and made sure I could get it out and done on time. And luckily this customer did give me a heads up with about 2 weeks or so to spare. So I was able to rush this one through because the last thing I want is for someone to buy one of my boards and end up having to give a gift late. Thankfully the name boards are a lot easier and more time efficient to make than something like the mushroom board here. The larger and more complex the inlay gets, the longer the entire process takes. Even going back to the whole flatness discussion, a smaller name inlay like this can usually be surfaced and sanded the next day without much issue. But something like the large mushroom board can take a couple days to fully settle back down and return to flat before I can continue working on it. And that only gets more amplified the more complex the board becomes, or if I do multiple inlays into the same piece. And just like that, this board was finished, handed off to Jess, and on its way to the customer. Which was really good timing because right after this is when everything started to go downhill.
So bad news for me, but I try to keep it as real as possible in these videos just because business isn't easy. And mid-use with the drum sander, it just stopped. The belt kept rolling, but the motor did not. Right away, I sent a ticket into Laguna, and while I was waiting for them, I actually have an electric motor repair person that's like 20 minutes away from me that I've used in the past. So I was tearing this apart and then Laguna called me mid-tear apart and they kind of walked me through what to look for. I didn't really have anything. I needed to test all the circuits and whatnot. So I just took the power box and the motor to the electric motor repairman and hopefully it's something simple. So we're down and out without a drum sander. This is one of the key tools in my shop. So I'm about to get creative on how to finish these boards. Best case scenario, it's just a little stupid switch that's pretty cheap. Back to work, and we're gonna have to figure out how to limp along without it. Right, Manny? Good dog.
And the following day, here's what I came up with. I couldn't use my vacuum bed because both sides were uneven, so I just kind of had to wedge the boards in there and surface them more like I would the larger boards. And it worked surprisingly well. It went pretty quick. I might actually do them like this more often in the future. And that's the cool thing about failure, or even just having a tool break. Sometimes you're forced into trying a different method. And a lot of the time it ends up teaching you a better and more efficient way to do something. Even when we had an employee, she'd ask why I did things a certain or specific way. A lot of the times I felt like I had a good explanation. But sometimes I realized I was only doing it that way because it's the way I've always done it. And I think a lot of us fall into that trap. If something works, we stop questioning it. But sometimes being forced to adapt is exactly what leads to a better process in the first place. I've never really been a, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of person. I'm always tinkering, experimenting, and trying different methods, which this entire video has kind of turned into that. And what I was hoping we wouldn't mess up was this sea turtle board I've been dying to bring to life. Although I was definitely dreading the sanding stage since we were still without a drum sander. But overall, things felt pretty on track. So let's just take a second to appreciate this bit gliding through the material before things start going wrong again. And right here's when the day took the wind right out of my sails. I never flipped the design on the inlay, therefore making it impossible to use this inlay on this specific board. And that's pretty much where we called it a day. I took a breather, stepped away from the shop for the night, and came back the next day once my frustration had settled down a little. And at that point, I decided to just save the plug and make another board with a flipped design instead. It was a pretty frustrating mistake because it's actually super simple to prevent, and typically it's the first thing I do when setting up a file, as I've done this once or twice before in the past. When you're working with words or lettering, it's usually really obvious if something gets flipped in the wrong direction or not flipped at all.
And that's what it's supposed to look like.
But with the sea turtle design, it could technically face either way, so I didn't catch it right away, or the dozens of times I've looked at it while I was carving or cutting it out. And hopefully this is the last time I make this mistake, because it's already been 2 or 3 times. Last time I just scrapped the plug completely, but since I already had a smaller batch going and had a little extra time to invest into making this one, I figured I might as well just turn it into another board instead of wasting time and material. So now not only do I have one board I'm not sure if it'll sell, I have 2, facing opposite directions. And here's another new design. Well, technically it's not new, it's actually a remake of an older board. But the more boards I make, the better I get at drawing and visualizing what's going to actually look good once it's on a cutting board instead of just a computer screen. I actually still have one of the older versions, so I'll show you both of those at the end to compare them side by side. And this design in particular is one that I've probably redrawn 8 different times over the years. Even though it probably won't look drastically different to most people, it's one of those boards that ended up teaching me a ton and ate up way more time than I ever expected it could. Another thing I've been experimenting with lately is cutting away as much excess material from the plug as possible. The extra wood tends to hold moisture longer, which causes more warping. Less warping means I can get back to work on the board faster, because realistically, probably a third of the process is just waiting for the wood to acclimate and flatten back out before I can move on to the next step. For example, here, I'll cut off the plug, and odds are I'll have to wait a day or 2 before I can press the inlay into the other half of the board. Versus this board, I could technically inlay it in 2 pieces, but the design is simple, so I can get away with a little more. I just remove the plug and let it sit for a few days, but as you can see here, how bad it actually warps. And that's one of the biggest things with a project like this. Just because the design looks good digitally, doesn't mean it'll automatically work in wood. And that's one of the things I was struggling with the flower design, that I spent way too much time on. Certain lines end up too thin, details disappear, contrast changes depending on wood species, and sometimes the design looks amazing on the computer screen, but just feels different once it becomes a physical object. And that's one of the reasons I always send customers a proof showing what the design will actually look like on wood with the species they chose, because it can be really hard to visualize otherwise. There are even some logos or designs I'll choose just not to make entirely. Personally, I try to avoid huge chunks of inlay whenever possible. If you look at my boards or even Nick at Brownwood's work, most of the image is usually made up of a bunch of smaller inlays, instead of one giant solid piece. It just holds up better long term with wood movement and seasonal changes. Because at the end of the day, the main board is always going to move a little differently than the inlay itself. And if these are designed properly, they should last forever. Unless somebody's taking full power cleaver swings to them, which in that case, I would just use a normal cutting board. That's why there's actually a ton that goes into making these boards work, which is what I try to show in these videos. Yes, I use a CNC, but it's still a ton of work. You're not just designing something to look cool, you're designing around tooling limitations, glue gaps, grain direction, wood movement, and how the design's actually going to read once it becomes a physical object. At this point, I understand my machine and bit limitations pretty well, so designing has become a lot easier over time. But that also means no, you can't just have AI generate some random image or grab some image off Google and turn it into a good inlay board. I wish it worked that way because it would save me a ridiculous amount of computer time. Even fonts can be a problem. If a certain parts are too thin, they'll fail. So a lot of the fonts I use actually need to be modified by hand to make sure every letter will inlay correctly. A lot of the process really just comes down to experimenting, mistakes, and slowly learning limitations over time. And speaking of learning limitations, this whole situation definitely made me appreciate my drum sander a whole lot more. Typically I start sanding around 120 grit, and it's not too bad. But this time around I had to start with 80 grit just to get all the mill marks cleaned up, and sheesh. My hat's off to all you sanding end grain boards without a drum sander, because the first sanding session felt like it took forever. I didn't actually time it, but it generally felt like it took twice as long. Not that I wanted to do a lot of extra sanding, but I'm glad this was a smaller batch. And the only thing I could think about when dropping off that drum sander motor at the repair shop was how grateful I was this didn't happen in the middle of November or December. Being without a drum sander for a few weeks during the busiest part of the year sounds like an absolute nightmare. The older I get, the less overwhelmed I seem to get by stuff like this. Maybe it's just from running a business for almost 9 years and getting used to things just going wrong. Or maybe I've finally realized there's no point in letting something completely out of my control ruin my entire day. And just like that, we've made it to my favorite part. Oiling the cutting boards and watching these things come to life and see all that hard work pay off. We ended up making 6 inlay boards, and then I also made these 2 normal end grain cutting boards for a local realtor. And here's the new pepperboard design, and I'll show you a board I messed up in the past. And here's the old design. It was one of my earlier boards I made, and the design was just okay. This came off with a wall of shame, where all my mess up boards go to die. And then all these boards will get a protective coat of wax, and I'll add rubber feet unless the customer requests otherwise. And that's gonna pretty much wrap up this video. Here's a quick shot of all the finished boards together, except the one we rushed out, that is. And I appreciate you all for watching and listening to me ramble. The next video will be a large project video. I think I'm gonna make a chair. It's been a while since I've made anything big. And as always, if you have any topics you want me to ramble about, let me know in the comments or other future video ideas. I loved all the suggestions and try to read a majority of the comments. So I hope you all have a wonderful day. Oh, and here's both the turtle boards. They're both available. Buy one or both. Thank you. Good day.
Moment of truth.